All right, on deck, the next one up, we have the Iron Bowl, Alabama, on the road at Auburn. The Tide are 14.5-point road favorites, and this game carries an over-under of 49 points. It kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Kelly, I know that we are shuffling around broadcasting windows, but can I get a petition to have the Iron Bowl always played on CBS, please? It just feels right. It's one of those, the Iron Bowl belongs on CBS no matter what conference affiliation they have. I know we're not going to get that, but I guess it'll be fun to hear Fowler and Herbie call this one on ESPN Monday. But anyway, I love this rivalry. It has so much history. It's one of the league's best. But outside of a couple of games, it just really hasn't been that competitive. And there hasn't really been that much at stake outside of the two fan bases. And sure, you could say Auburn's had the ability to knock Alabama out of the college football playoff. Maybe they even had one of these times. But I don't know. This one just doesn't have currently the same on-field juice as Bedlam, as the game, as a couple of these other ones. I'm just putting it out there. In terms of the entirety of it and the culture and the vitriol, yes, the Iron Bowl is in that top tier. But the on-field product right now, I think, is lacking just a little bit. So the big injury for Auburn, I've been talking about it a couple of times. They're still missing their starting center, Avery Jones. He is a veteran. He's a transfer. He was a former all-conference performer for East Carolina. Instead, they've got a true freshman playing in his place, and he's playing it okay, about replacement level. But when you're the center, you call protections. And if you're a freshman, especially one that has not gone against Saban's defense before, that is a big disadvantage. So I'm looking for maybe gaps in protection for Auburn's offensive line. That is very in the weeds, but I do think it matters a little bit. After all the surprise teams, the upsets, the uncertainty at the beginning of the year, there are three teams right now that are really finding their stride: Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama. And it's almost a sense of inevitable dread that we're going to be left with three of the same teams that we've had even after a large shakeup, I would say, to the college football season. And interestingly, Hugh Freeze is the only FBS coach that has beaten Nick Saban in back-to-back seasons, that being 2014 and 15 at Ole Miss. Now, apparently Jerry Kill has him on lock. So I guess Jerry Kill greater than Nick Saban is what I'm really trying to get at here. So look, at plus 14.5, I lean Auburn. I know it sounds ridiculous after they just got their brains beat in by New Mexico State. And look, that wasn't just a look ahead. That was we got beat soundly, got outgained. However, the rumor is Hugh Freeze apparently didn't have anything to do with this game plan. He just said, yep, whatever. And Diego Pavia made them pay for it, I guess. And it showed, so he was out recruiting and all that kind of stuff. But Alabama's really struggled on the road at Jordan-Hare lately. They had a 2-point quadruple overtime win and 2 outright losses the last 3 times that they visited the Plains. 14 seems to be the buy point for Alabama. As soon as it hits 14, it's a rebound of that 14.5. So I'm buying up the 14.5. And of course, in a rivalry this caliber, there's no lack of motivation on either side. We're not dealing with any team that's going to sleepwalk through this one. But the Tide do have their spot in the SEC championship game locked up. So do they really want to risk any major injuries in this game? If they have it on, they've got it locked down. Like it's a 10-point game with a minute left. They're pulling their guys. They're not going for that extra score. I'm not saying they lose. The college football playoff is still on the line. But laying more than 14 here, I think, is a little bit generous looking at this spot. Rivalry week is my most situation-heavy week on the docket. I think a lot of times the underlying metrics of these games are for naught because you throw it out the window where you're dealing with this or teams' motivations. I'm taking Auburn with the points.
Brett, I love this game. It's one of my favorites every single year. I'm not even from Alabama or the South. It just means a ton in college football. It just means more, you might say. Sorry, I didn't even plan to say that one. It always has. It always will. This game, it's part of the fabric of college football's history. I have Alabama minus 12.5. It's an 81% win expectancy. Alabama is number 6 in my power ratings with the number 6 defense and number 16 offense. But numbers aside, you kind of touch on this. Jalen Milroe has been playing really well for a month plus now. And this team just seems to be humming, as we've seen from Nick Saban coach teams time and time again this time of year. I agree with you. They're playing as well as just about anybody. And I'm looking forward to making that form section of the dashboard moving forward so I can track on that a little bit more closely every single week. I mentioned that on a previous show. Georgia's on the horizon next week in Atlanta. If the opponent was any other team than Auburn this week, I'd have the Tide on upset alert. But it's the Iron Bowl. There's no way Bama's looking ahead. And, Brett, I know you touched on this. Speaking of looking ahead, I think that has to be what happened to Auburn last week. You're saying, I think it's more than that. It can't just be that. I don't know what else to chalk it up to. And you're saying the rumor is Hugh Freeze had nothing to do with the game plan and all. Okay, I guess I hadn't heard that. I guess that's an interesting strategy to take, one that no one probably thinks twice about. If you win, but you just lost by 21. So I mean, you got to second guess that one at this point. If that's the case, and I'm an Auburn athletic director or administrator, I'm pretty concerned by those reports. Like, hey, coach, I know recruiting is important. I know we got to get the next guys in here. That doesn't help recruiting when you lose at home by 21 to a New Mexico State team that historically has not been very good. So I'm going to chalk it up to they were looking ahead. As a result of that, what's up?
Yes, but they also got soundly beat. This wasn't just a whoops-a-day. Kelly, they were held to 65 rushing yards and 2 of 10 on third down by New Mexico State's defense.
I'm literally speechless. I know. I turned the game on because I got the 5 TV set up, right? And I'm, got my watchability grid, and I'm trying to figure out, this game wasn't on the watchability grid. You can believe that. It was not on my radar. So I'm scrolling, through just to make sure I'm keeping an eye on, all the scores as I'm getting in the second half of these games, getting ready to, change a channel, make sure I'm keeping up with the right ones. And I see that one, and I'm like, well, that can't be right. So I click on it, and it still said that score, and I go, this has to be a mistake. So I actually went to a different app and said, well, what is the score of this game? And it came up the same thing, and I said, all right, I got to put this thing on. And so I turned it on because I had to see it for myself. It was crazy, dude. As a result of that performance, Auburn fell 2.5 points in my power ratings this week. That's the second biggest downgrade of any team this week in the power ratings. If you fall 2.5 points from week 2 to week 3 or week 3 to week 4, it's really not that big of a deal. That kind of happens frequently. If you fall 2.5 points from week 12 to week 13 in the power ratings, that's a big deal. That's a huge drop this late in the year. 2.5 points is a huge swing either way this late in the year. Wow. The model could not believe what it saw either based on that, and it adjusted accordingly. Ranking number 21 nationally, I do expect the Auburn defense to be able to hang in there with the Tide offense. I know that Tide offense is playing well. I think the defense will be able to hold its own, especially at home. But even though this game is on the Plains, that number 70 Tiger defense, that's cause for serious concern for the model. Bottom line, I've got Alabama minus 12.5. It's a 19% chance that Auburn wins the Iron Bowl for the first time since before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. It has been a long time for the Tigers. I agree with you, Brett. Your opening comments, it has some of the best moments in college football history. I mean, none better than the kick six. Sorry, yep. Alabama fans, but that's an iconic moment. You're right, though. There's been some like that, but it feels like more times than not, the game itself actually recently hasn't been all that competitive. So interesting to kind of think about that way because I just see Iron Bowl and I'm like, yep, I'm all in. Let's do it. But you're right. We'll see if this year can be any different.